The echo of gunshots faded as Nathaniel Porter rode hard across the windswept plains of Wyoming Territory. The year 1878 bringing nothing but trouble since January. Blood trickled from a gash on his arm, evidence of the latest bounty hunter who'd mistaken him for his outlaw brother, a mistake that had cost the man his life, but gave Nate no satisfaction. When the rumble started, he thought it was thunder at first. Then he saw them hundreds of cattle in a panic, a dust cloud rising behind them like the wrath of God himself. They surged over the ridge, a deadly wave of hooves and horns. Nate spurred his horse sideways, barely escaping the leading edge of the stampede. That's when he spotted her, a flash of fabric among the chaos, a woman on horseback, desperately trying to outrun the cattle. Her horse stumbled, sending her flying through the air, her body disappearing beneath the trampling hooves. "Damnation!" Nate cursed, wheeling his stallion around. He couldn't leave her to die, not if there was any chance at all. When the last of the cattle had passed, he found her half buried in churned earth, miraculously not trampled to death but bloodied and unmoving. Her chestnut hair spilled across the dirt like spilled whiskey, her fine-featured face pale as parchment. She was young, perhaps 23, and dressed in clothes that spoke of money. "Miss, can you hear me?" Nate touched her neck, feeling for a pulse. It fluttered beneath his fingers, weak but present. Thank God. He carefully checked for broken bones, finding her right leg bent at an unnatural angle and a nasty gash across her forehead. He gently lifted her onto his horse, cradling her unconscious form against his chest. His cabin was a few miles away, tucked in a hidden valley where he'd been living since leaving his past behind in Texas. He'd spent 2 years avoiding people, and now he was bringing a half-dead woman to his doorstep. The irony wasn't lost on him. By sundown, he'd laid her on his bed, splinted her broken leg, and cleaned the blood from her face. Her breathing was steady, but she hadn't stirred. Nate sat in the chair beside the bed, studying her features in the lamplight. "Who are you?" he murmured, though he knew she couldn't answer. He found no identification in her pockets, just a locket containing a portrait of an older couple, parents perhaps. Her clothing was expensive, her hands soft with no calluses. She wasn't a ranch woman or a frontier wife. What was she doing out here alone? For 3 days, Nate tended to her. He spooned broth between her lips, changed the bandages on her wounds, and spoke to her in quiet tones, though she remained unconscious. On the 4th morning, as he was replacing the cool cloth on her forehead, her eyelids fluttered open. She stared at him with eyes the color of summer sage, confusion giving way to fear. "It's all right," Nate said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe. There was a stampede. Do you remember?" Her voice came out as a croak. "Water." He helped her drink, supporting her head with one hand. When she'd had enough, she sank back against the pillow, exhaustion plain on her face. "My name is Nathaniel Porter. Most call me Nate. You're in my cabin about 20 miles outside of Kingston." "Kingston," she repeated, her brow furrowing. "Wyoming Territory. Yes, madam, I'm Delilah Armstrong." She tried to sit up but gasped in pain. "Easy now," Nate said. "Your leg's broken and you took a nasty blow to the head. You need to rest." "How long have I been here?" 4 days. "You were caught in a cattle stampede." "I found you unconscious." Fear flashed across her face again. "You've been caring for me all this time." Nate understood her concern. A young woman alone with a stranger was reason enough for alarm. "Yes, but I give you my word I've been a gentleman. I couldn't leave you to die, Miss Armstrong." She studied him, seeming to take his measure. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Porter. Call me Nate, please." "Then I'm Delilah." Her eyes clouded with pain, and Nate quickly fetched the laudanum he kept for emergencies. "This will help with the pain," he said, measuring a dose. Then you should sleep. She accepted the medicine without protest, a testament to her suffering. As she drifted off, she murmured, "I was trying to reach Kingston, my uncle's ranch." Nate watched her slip into sleep, wondering what to do next. If she had family in Kingston, he'd need to let them know she was alive. But leaving her alone wasn't an option, not in her condition. He'd figure it out tomorrow. For now, he was just relieved she'd woken up. The next morning, Delilah woke to sunlight streaming through a small window. Pain throbbed in her leg and head, but her mind was clearer. She looked around the sparse cabin, a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn furniture, and shelves lined with books that seemed out of place in such a rustic setting. The door opened, and Nate entered carrying an armful of firewood. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the deep blue of a mountain lake. His face was weathered, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his skin. "You're awake," he said, setting down the wood. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by cattle," Delilah replied, attempting humor despite her discomfort. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair assessment." "Are you hungry?" "Starving, actually." He nodded, crossing to the small stove. "I can manage a passable breakfast, nothing fancy." "Mr. Porter, Nate, I need to send word to my uncle in Kingston. His name is Theodore Armstrong. He'll be worried sick." Nate stirred something in a pot. "There's a problem with that. We had 3 days of rain after I brought you here. The creeks flooded, cutting off the trail to town. It'll be a few more days before it's passable." Delilah closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. "Uncle Theodore doesn't even know I arrived early. I was supposed to meet the stagecoach in Cheyenne next week, but I decided to surprise him." She laughed bitterly. "Some surprise. Why were you traveling alone?" Nate asked, bringing her a bowl of porridge sweetened with honey. "I wasn't supposed to be. My companion fell ill in Denver and I continued without her." She took a bite of the porridge. "This is good, thank you." "Not as good as whatever you're used to, I imagine." She looked up at him. "What makes you say that? Your hands, your clothes, the way you speak." He shrugged. "You're not from around here." "Boston," she admitted. "But I grew up spending summers on my uncle's ranch. I'm not completely helpless." "I didn't say you were." He sat in the chair beside the bed. "But riding alone was reckless." A flash of anger cut through her pain. "I don't need a lecture, Mr. Porter. I'm quite aware of my mistakes." He raised an eyebrow. Back to Mr. Porter now. Despite herself, Delilah felt her lips twitch. "You're infuriating." "So I've been told." He stood. "Finish your breakfast. I need to check your leg and change the bandages." Delilah suddenly realized the implications. "Have you been?" "I mean my clothes." "I removed your boots and outer garments only," Nate said, his tone matter of fact. "Your modesty is intact, Miss Armstrong," she blushed. "Thank you, and it's just Delilah, remember." After breakfast, Nate carefully examined her leg. His hands were gentle but sure, and Delilah found herself studying his face as he worked. There were lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun or from laughter. She couldn't tell. A thin scar bisected his left eyebrow. "How did you learn to do this?" she asked, wincing as he tightened the splint. "Army Medical Corps during the war," he replied. "I was a stretcher bearer, then a field medic, saw more broken bones than I care to remember." "You fought for the Union," his hands stilled momentarily. "Yes. Though many where I'm from didn't." "Texas," she guessed, noting his slight accent. He nodded, finishing with the splint. "Laredo. My family owned a small ranch there." "Owned?" she asked, catching the past tense. "It's gone now." His tone made it clear the subject was closed. "Your leg is healing well, but you won't be walking on it for at least 6 weeks." 6 weeks? Delilah exclaimed. "I can't stay here for 6 weeks." As soon as the creek subsides, I'll take you to Kingston. Your uncle can care for you there." He stood and gathered the bandaging materials. "In the meantime, you're stuck with me." The days stretched into a week. The rain continued intermittently, keeping the creek high and the trail to Kingston impassable. Delilah's frustration grew, but so did her strength. The pain in her head subsided, though her leg remained immobile in its splint. Nate proved to be a surprising caretaker patient, capable and far more educated than she'd initially assumed. His bookshelf contained volumes of Shakespeare, Thoreau, and even Greek philosophy. When she commented on it, he merely shrugged and said, "A man needs company out here." Books don't ask questions. Unlike her, he didn't say, but Delilah heard it nonetheless. Each day, Nate helped her sit up, brought her meals, and even carried her outside to sit on the porch when the weather was fine. They fell into an unexpected rhythm, their conversations growing longer as the days passed. "Why did you leave Boston?" he asked one evening as they shared a simple supper of rabbit stew. Delilah picked at her food. "My parents died last winter. Influenza." The house, the life I knew, it all felt hollow afterward. Uncle Theodore invited me to stay with him indefinitely. I needed a change. Nate nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'm sorry about your parents." "What about your family?" she asked, steering the conversation away from her grief. A shadow crossed his face. "My mother died when I was young, my father and brother." He shook his head. "We're not close." "No wife, children?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "No." The word hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. "I'm sorry," Delilah said softly. "I shouldn't pry." Nate's expression softened slightly. "It's natural to be curious about the stranger who's holding you captive." "Is that what this is? A captivity?" He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. "A mutual imprisonment, perhaps. You can't leave and I can't leave you." That night, Delilah lay awake long after Nate had settled on his bedroll near the fire. She thought about the man who'd saved her life, this solitary cowboy with his books and his ghosts. There was a story there, one he kept closely guarded, and despite her better judgment, she wanted to know it. On the 10th day, the rain finally stopped. Nate rode out to check the creek and returned with news that the water had receded enough for travel. "We'll leave for Kingston tomorrow," he announced, removing his wet coat. "It'll be slow going with your leg, but we should make it by nightfall." Delilah felt a strange disappointment. "Oh, that's good news." Nate glanced at her, then busied himself with building up the fire. "Your uncle will be relieved to see you." "Yes, of course." She hesitated. "Nate, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." "No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same." "That's not true, and you know it," she said firmly. "Most men would have taken me to the nearest town and washed their hands of the situation. You've cared for me like family." He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." That evening, as Delilah dozed, she was awakened by the sound of Nate's voice. He was outside on the porch, speaking to someone. Curious and a bit alarmed, she pulled herself up and reached for the crutch he'd fashioned for her. Moving slowly and painfully, she made her way to the window. Through the glass, she could see Nate talking with a heavyset man on horseback. The stranger wore a badge as sheriff or marshal. The conversation appeared tense, with Nate standing rigid, his hand not far from the pistol at his hip. After a few minutes, the lawman rode away and Nate remained on the porch, staring after him. When he turned to come inside, Delilah hurried to get back to bed, nearly falling in her haste. The door opened as she settled under the covers, heart pounding. Nate entered, his expression dark. "Who was that?" Delilah asked, unable to pretend she hadn't noticed. "Sheriff from Kingston," Nate replied tersely. "Making his rounds. Is everything all right?" He looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "Fine. Get some sleep." But Delilah couldn't sleep, not with the tension radiating from Nate as he sat cleaning his rifle by the fire. Something about the sheriff's visit had disturbed him deeply. She wondered what secrets this quiet, solitary man was keeping. The journey to Kingston the next day was as difficult as Nate had warned. He fashioned a travois for Delilah, securing it to his horse while he rode the mare she'd been riding when the stampede occurred. The animal had found its way back to his cabin 3 days after the incident. Delilah endured the jolting ride stoically, though by midday her leg throbbed mercilessly. Nate stopped frequently to check on her, his concern evident despite his continued taciturn mood. "We're making good time," he said during one such stop, helping her sip from a canteen. "Should reach Kingston by sunset." "Nate," Delilah said, gathering her courage, "that sheriff who visited, what did he want?" Nate's jaw tightened. "Just routine patrol, nothing to concern yourself with." "You're lying." She held his gaze steadily. "After everything, don't I deserve the truth?" He sighed, looking away. "Some truths are better left buried, Delilah. Are you in some kind of trouble?" A humorless laugh escaped him. "My whole life is trouble, but it's my burden, not yours." "It becomes mine if it affects my safety," she countered. His eyes flashed with anger. "Have I given you any reason to fear me? Have I harmed you in any way?" "No," she admitted softly. "You've been nothing but kind." The anger drained from him, replaced by weariness. "Let's keep moving. Your uncle is waiting." As they approached Kingston, Delilah saw it was larger than she'd expected, a proper town with wooden sidewalks, a church steeple, and businesses lining the main street. People stopped to stare as they passed, whispering behind their hands at the sight of a woman being transported on a travois. Nate ignored the stares, asking directions to Theodore Armstrong's ranch. It lay just outside town, a sprawling property with a large house and several outbuildings. As they approached, a man came running from the barn, followed by several ranch hands. "Delilah, my God, is that you?" The man reached them, his face a mask of shock and relief. "Uncle Theodore." Tears sprang to Delilah's eyes at the sight of her mother's brother. He was older than she remembered, his beard now streaked with gray, but his kind eyes were unchanged. Theodore helped her from the travois, cradling her carefully. "What happened? We weren't expecting you for another week." "I decided to surprise you," Delilah explained as he carried her toward the house. "My horse was caught in a stampede. This is Mr. Porter, Nate. He saved my life." Theodore turned to Nate, who remained mounted. "Sir, I am forever in your debt. Please come inside. We must properly thank you." Nate shook his head. "No need for thanks, Mr. Armstrong. I'm glad she's home safe." "At least stay for supper," Theodore insisted. "You've traveled all day." Delilah looked up at Nate, silently pleading with him to accept. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "I can stay a while." Inside the comfortable ranch house, Delilah was reunited with her Aunt Margaret, who fussed over her injuries and immediately sent for the town doctor. While they waited, Theodore insisted on hearing the full story of the stampede and Nate's rescue. Throughout the telling, Nate remained quiet, letting Delilah do most of the talking. He seemed uncomfortable with the Armstrongs' effusive gratitude, shifting in his chair and frequently checking the window as if expecting trouble. When Dr. Lewis arrived, Nate excused himself to tend to the horses. Delilah watched him go, concern growing at his obvious discomfort. "Your Mr. Porter seems a bit skittish," Uncle Theodore observed as the doctor examined Delilah's leg. "He's not my Mr. Porter," she replied, wincing as Dr. Lewis prodded her injured limb. "He's just private, lives alone in a cabin in the woods." Theodore exchanged a glance with the doctor. "Lewis, you know most folks around here. Ever heard of a Nathaniel Porter?" The doctor frowned thoughtfully. "Can't say that I have, But then some men come west to start fresh, leave their real names behind. What are you suggesting? Delilah asked sharply. Nothing, my dear, Theodore soothed. Just an observation. Regardless of his past, the man saved your life. We owe him a great debt. Dr. Lewis confirmed Nate's assessment of Delilah's injuries, a clean break that was healing well, and the head wound nearly mended. He praised the quality of care she'd received, remarking that many field doctors during the war hadn't shown such skill. By the time Nate returned, supper was ready. Aunt Margaret had prepared a feast in celebration of Delilah's safe return. Nate ate sparingly, complimenting the food but maintaining his guard. When Theodore offered him whiskey, he declined. "Don't drink," he explained. "But thank you." After the meal, as Margaret cleared the dishes, Theodore leaned forward. "Mr. Porter, I want to compensate you for saving my niece and caring for her these past 2 weeks." Nate stiffened. "That's not necessary. I insist. Name your price." "I didn't help her for money." Theodore nodded slowly. "A man of principle, I respect that. But perhaps there's something else you need. Supplies. Livestock." Before Nate could respond, the front door burst open. Sheriff Dawson stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 deputies, all with guns drawn. "Nathaniel Porter," Dawson announced, "you're under arrest for the murder of James Blackburn." The room froze. Theodore rose slowly, confusion on his face. "Sheriff, what's the meaning of this?" Dawson kept his gun trained on Nate. "This man is wanted in Texas for killing a ranger. Been tracking him for months." Delilah felt the blood drain from her face. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake, miss." Dawson's eyes never left Nate. "On your feet, Porter, hands where I can see them." Nate stood slowly, his expression resigned. "It's not what you think, Delilah." "Shut up," Dawson barked. "You'll get your say before the judge." Theodore stepped between them. "Wait just a minute. This man saved my niece's life. Surely we can discuss this civilly." "Stand aside, Armstrong. This isn't your concern." Delilah struggled to her feet, ignoring the pain. "It most certainly is our concern. You can't just burst in here and arrest a man who's done nothing but good." "Delilah," Nate said quietly, "it's all right. I'll go peacefully, Sheriff." As the deputies moved to handcuff him, Delilah grabbed her uncle's arm. "Do something, he's innocent." "How do you know that?" Theodore asked gently. "Because I know him." The conviction in her voice surprised even herself. Nate gave her a sad smile. "You don't know everything, Delilah." As they led him away, Delilah felt as though her heart was being torn from her chest. The man who had saved her, cared for her, shown her nothing but kindness, a murderer. She couldn't believe it. "Uncle," she pleaded, "we have to help him." Theodore's expression was grave. "If he's innocent, he'll get a fair trial. That's all anyone can ask for." But Delilah had seen the hatred in Sheriff Dawson's eyes. She feared fair was the last thing Nate would receive. That night, unable to sleep, Delilah convinced her aunt to help her dress. Despite Margaret's protests, she insisted on going to the jailhouse. "He saved my life," Delilah argued. "The least I can do is hear his side of the story." Margaret reluctantly agreed to accompany her, and Theodore, awakened by their preparations, insisted on driving them in the buggy. They arrived at the small jailhouse just before midnight. Sheriff Dawson was asleep at his desk, feet propped up, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his elbow. He startled awake when they entered. "Armstrong, what in blazes are you doing here at this hour?" "My niece wishes to speak with the prisoner," Theodore stated firmly. "As a courtesy to one of Kingston's founding families, I trust you'll allow it." Dawson grumbled but relented, leading them to the cells at the back. Nate sat on a narrow cot, his hat beside him. He looked up in surprise when they appeared. "5 minutes," Dawson said, unlocking the door. "And I'll be right here watching." Delilah hobbled in with her crutch, Theodore supporting her other side. Nate stood, concern crossing his features. "You shouldn't be walking on that leg." A laugh bubbled from her throat, tinged with hysteria. "That's what you're worried about. You're facing murder charges." "Delilah, tell me it isn't true," she interrupted. "Tell me you didn't kill a Texas Ranger." Nate's silence was answer enough. Delilah felt her world tilt. "Why?" she whispered. He sat back down, rubbing a hand over his face. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicated," Theodore said. "If you want our help, we need the truth." Nate looked between them, then nodded. "The man I killed Blackburn wasn't just a ranger. He was hunting my brother Sam for a bank robbery in Houston, caught up to him at our father's ranch." His voice grew tight. "Sam wasn't there, but Blackburn didn't believe it. Started roughing up my father, an old man who'd never broken a law in his life. When I interfered, Blackburn drew on me." "Self-defense, then," Theodore concluded. "That's how I saw it, but Blackburn had friends in high places." His version that I ambushed him to protect my outlaw brother became the official story. "There was a price on my head before my father was even buried." "Your father died?" Delilah asked softly. Blackburn's beating was too much for his heart. Nate's eyes held a haunted look. "I buried him alone, then ran." Delilah reached for his hand. "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have trusted me if you knew I was wanted for murder?" His fingers tightened around hers. "Besides, it didn't matter out there, just you and me and staying alive." Sheriff Dawson cleared his throat. "Time's up." Delilah ignored him. "We'll help you, Nate. There must be witnesses, evidence." "Delilah." Nate's voice was gentle but firm. "Go home, forget about me. Live the life you came west to find." "How can I do that knowing what you did for me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You saved my life, and you've brightened mine more than you know." He released her hand as Dawson approached. "That's payment enough." As Theodore helped her from the cell, Delilah looked back at Nate. "This isn't over." For the first time since his arrest, a ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Stubborn woman." Back at the ranch, Delilah refused to rest. Despite her injuries, she insisted on helping Theodore draft telegrams to Texas, seeking information about the Blackburn case. They contacted the county sheriff, the court clerk, even the governor's office. Days passed with no response. Nate's trial was set for the following week, with Judge Harmon riding circuit from Cheyenne. The charges were severe: murder of a law enforcement officer. If convicted, Nate would hang. Delilah visited the jailhouse daily, bringing food and books. Sheriff Dawson grudgingly allowed these visits, though he never left them alone. Nate seemed resigned to his fate, more concerned with Delilah's health than his own predicament. "You need to stay off that leg," he chided during one visit. "It won't heal properly if you keep rushing around town." "My leg is fine," she insisted, though the pain still woke her at night. "It's your neck I'm worried about, Delilah." He lowered his voice, glancing at Dawson, who sat just out of earshot. "You need to prepare yourself. The evidence is stacked against me." "I won't accept that." She leaned closer. "I've been reading law books from Uncle's library. There are precedents for self-defense cases like yours." Nate's expression softened. "You'd have made a fine lawyer. Don't humor me." Her eyes flashed. "I'm not giving up." 3 days before the trial, a telegram arrived from Laredo. Theodore brought it directly to Delilah, who read it with trembling hands. "Uncle," she breathed, "this changes everything." The message was from Sheriff Collins of Laredo County, confirming that new evidence had emerged in the Blackburn case. A witness had come forward, the blacksmith who'd been working nearby when the confrontation occurred. His testimony corroborated Nate's account of self-defense. Furthermore, an investigation into Blackburn's activities had uncovered corruption, with evidence he'd been taking bribes to overlook certain crimes. "The Texas authorities have rescinded the murder charge," Theodore explained as they hurried to the jailhouse. "They're requesting Porter be released immediately." Sheriff Dawson was not pleased. "This telegram could be forged. I need official confirmation." "Then telegraph Lairdo yourself," Theodore challenged. "But Porter stays in my custody until this is sorted out. I'll post whatever bond you require." After hours of argument and more telegrams, Dawson reluctantly released Nate into Theodore's custody, with strict orders not to leave Kingston until official documents arrived from Texas. As they left the jailhouse, Nate stood blinking in the sunlight, seeming unsure of his newfound freedom. "What happens now?" he asked. Theodore clapped him on the shoulder. "Now, young man, you come home with us and have a proper meal. The rest can wait." At the ranch, Aunt Margaret prepared a celebratory dinner. Nate bathed and changed into clothes Theodore lent him, emerging looking younger and less careworn. Delilah, seated in the parlor with her leg propped up as Nate had insisted, caught her breath when he entered the room. "You clean up well, Mr. Porter," she said, trying to sound casual. He ran a hand through his damp hair, looking self-conscious. "Feels strange without trail dust caked on." During dinner, Theodore proposed a toast, "To justice prevailing and to the man who saved my niece's life twice over." Nate raised his water glass awkwardly. "I'm grateful for your trust, sir." "Not many would have taken a wanted man's word." "Delilah took your word," Theodore corrected. "We merely followed her lead." Later, as Margaret and Theodore retired for the night, Delilah and Nate sat on the porch. The summer night was warm, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. In the distance, coyotes called to one another, their cries hauntingly beautiful. "What will you do now?" Delilah asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Nate gazed at the horizon. "Not sure. Can't go back to Texas, too many memories. Might head farther west, maybe California." The thought of him leaving sent a sharp pain through Delilah's chest. "Or you could stay," he glanced at her. "Here in Kingston." "Why not? You've made a friend in Uncle Theodore. He mentioned needing a foreman for the north pasture." She hesitated. "And I'll be here." Nate was quiet for a long moment. "Delilah, I'm not the kind of man a woman like you should tie herself to." "What kind of man is that? Honorable, brave, gentle?" She leaned forward. "Because that's what I've seen. You've seen the best of me because you bring it out." His voice was rough with emotion. "But I've lived a hard life, done things I'm not proud of. I'm not educated or cultured." "Stop." Delilah reached for his hand. "I don't care about any of that. These past weeks, despite the circumstances, they've been the most real days of my life. You saw me, not Boston society's Delilah Armstrong, but just me. And you saw me," he said softly, "when no one else bothered to look." Their fingers intertwined, and Delilah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer night. "Stay," she whispered. "At least long enough for us to find out what this is." Nate brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'm not good with words like your books, but I'd be a fool to ride away from you, Delilah Armstrong." The official pardon from Texas arrived a week later. Sheriff Dawson delivered it personally to the Armstrong ranch, looking sour but resigned. With his name cleared, Nate accepted Theodore's offer of the foreman position, moving into the small but comfortable cabin near the main house. Over the following months, Nate proved himself invaluable to the ranch operations. His knowledge of cattle and horses impressed even the most skeptical ranch hands, and his quiet authority earned their respect. Theodore, watching him transform the struggling north pasture into productive grazing land, wondered how he'd managed without him. Delilah's leg healed slowly. By autumn, she was walking with only a slight limp, though the doctor warned she might always have pain during cold weather. She took on the ranch's bookkeeping, revealing a head for figures that surprised her uncle. But her favorite hours were spent riding alongside Nate, learning the land that was becoming home. Their courtship progressed with proper decorum: afternoon rides, chaperone dinners, and conversations on the porch swing. Behind this propriety, however, burned a passion born during those intense days in Nate's cabin. A bond forged in crisis, tempered by adversity, and strengthened by mutual respect. When the first snow fell in November, Theodore found them by the fireplace, heads bent over a book they were reading together. Watching them, he recognized what true companionship looked like: not the society matches he'd witnessed in Boston, but a partnership of equals. That Christmas, with the Armstrong house decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, Nate asked Theodore for permission to court Delilah officially. Theodore, who'd been expecting this conversation, gave his blessing without hesitation. "You've already proven your worth 10 times over," he told the younger man. "But remember, she's had enough trauma in her life. Be gentle with her heart." "Yes, sir," Nate promised. "I intend to protect it with my life." On Christmas Eve, as snow fell softly outside, Nate presented Delilah with a small wooden box he'd carved himself. Inside lay a simple silver ring set with a small sapphire. "It was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing of value I have to offer." "It's beautiful," Delilah breathed, tears gathering in her eyes. "I can't promise wealth or status," Nate said, taking her hand. "But I can promise to love you every day of my life, to work for your happiness, to stand beside you through whatever comes." "If that's enough, it's everything," she interrupted, framing his face with her hands. "You're everything." When he slipped the ring onto her finger, Margaret sniffled loudly from the doorway, causing them both to laugh. Theodore appeared behind his wife, beaming with approval. "Well, I suppose we have another reason to celebrate tonight," he announced, raising his glass. To Nate and Delilah, the wedding took place in spring, when the Wyoming prairie erupted in wildflowers. The entire town of Kingston attended Nate's pardon, and his romance with Delilah having become something of a local legend. Even Sheriff Dawson came, grudgingly offering congratulations and a bottle of fine whiskey that Nate politely accepted, though he still didn't drink. Delilah wore a gown of cream-colored silk that Margaret had ordered from Denver, with wildflowers in her hair instead of the traditional veil. Nate, unrecognizable in a new black suit, looked at her as though she were the sun itself as she walked toward him on Theodore's arm. They exchanged vows beneath an arch of spring blossoms, their words simple but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nate's kiss was gentle, mindful of the audience, but his eyes promised more. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing spilling from the Armstrong house across the moonlit pastures. At midnight, the couple slipped away to the foreman's cabin, now expanded and furnished as their home. Alone at last, they stood facing each other, suddenly shy despite the months of growing intimacy. "Mrs. Porter," Nate said, his voice husky. "Still certain you haven't made a terrible mistake?" Delilah stepped into his arms. "The only mistake would have been letting you ride away." Their first night as husband and wife was a revelation, tender, passionate, and healing for two souls who had known too much loss. As dawn painted the eastern sky, they lay entwined, whispering dreams and promises. "I never thought I'd find this," Nate confessed, tracing the curve of her cheek. "After everything that happened in Texas, I figured I'd live and die alone. And I never expected to find love in the aftermath of a cattle stampede," Delilah replied with a soft laugh. "Life has strange ways of leading us home." Summer brought prosperity to the Armstrong ranch. Cattle prices were high, and under Nate's management, their herd had increased significantly. Theodore, seeing the success, made a decision. "I'm getting old," he announced one evening as they sat on the porch after supper. "Margaret and I have been talking about moving to Denver. Her sister's there, and these winters are getting harder on my joints." "You're not that old," Delilah protested. Theodore smiled. "Old enough to know it's time for the next generation to take over." He looked at Nate. "We want to sign over the ranch to you two, make it official." Nate was stunned. "Sir, that's too generous. This land has been in your family and it will stay in the family," Theodore interrupted. "You're my family now, son, both of you." The transfer of ownership happened without fanfare, simply papers signed in the lawyer's office in Kingston. Theodore insisted the ranch keep the Armstrong name, for continuity. But everyone knew it was now the Porter Ranch in all but legality. That autumn, as Theodore and Margaret prepared for their move to Denver, Delilah discovered she was expecting a child. The news filled their small community with joy, especially Theodore, who delayed the move until after the baby's arrival. "Can't have my grand-niece or nephew born without me nearby," he insisted, though everyone knew Margaret's sister in Denver was growing impatient with the delay. The winter was harsh, with blizzards sweeping across the territory. Nate worked tirelessly to protect the cattle, sometimes staying out for days to move herds to sheltered valleys. Delilah worried constantly, her condition making her more emotional than usual. One night, as a particularly violent storm raged, Nate hadn't returned from checking the western pasture. By midnight, Delilah was frantic. "He should have been back hours ago," she told Theodore, pacing despite her growing belly. "Something's wrong." "The men are organizing a search party," Theodore assured her. "But they can't go out until the storm breaks. It would be suicide." Delilah wrung her hands. "He could be freezing to death while we wait." "Nate knows this land better than anyone," Theodore reminded her. "He'll find shelter." But as dawn approached with no sign of her husband, Delilah's fear grew. The storm had finally subsided, and the search party was preparing to leave when they heard hoofbeats in the yard. Delilah rushed to the door, flinging it open to see Nate dismounting slowly, his movements stiff with cold. His face was raw from windburn, his clothes crusted with ice, but he was alive. "Nate!" she cried, rushing to him despite her awkward gait. He caught her, holding her close. "Easy, darlin', I'm all right." Later, warmed by the fire and a hot meal, he explained how his horse had stumbled in a snowdrift, throwing him. The animal had bolted, leaving him to seek shelter in an abandoned line shack until the storm passed. "Thought of you the whole time," he told Delilah as she sat beside him, unwilling to let go of his hand. "Knew I had to get back to you and the little one." "Don't ever scare me like that again," she whispered fiercely. He kissed her forehead. "I'll do my best." Spring arrived just in time for the birth of their son. After a difficult labor that left Nate pacing the yard for hours, driven out by the midwife who declared men were useless in the birthing room, Delilah delivered a healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. They named him Thomas Theodore Porter, honoring both Delilah's father and her uncle. Theodore, holding his namesake for the first time, wept unashamedly. "Finest boy I've ever seen," he declared, though he'd said the same about every baby born in Kingston for 20 years. Motherhood suited Delilah, who took to it with the same determination she applied to everything. Nate, watching her nurse their son, felt a love so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. "What did I do to deserve this?" he murmured one evening, cradling Thomas while Delilah rested. "You saved a foolish Boston girl from certain death," she replied sleepily. "The universe has a way of balancing accounts." Theodore and Margaret finally departed for Denver when Thomas was 3 months old. The farewell was emotional, with promises of visits and regular letters. As the stagecoach pulled away, Delilah leaned against Nate's shoulder, their son sleeping in her arms. "It feels like the end of an era," she said softly. Nate kissed the top of her head. "And the beginning of ours." The years that followed were filled with hard work and joy in equal measure. The ranch prospered under Nate's stewardship. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious child with his mother's intelligence and his father's quiet strength. When he was 3, a sister joined the family, Elizabeth Margaret, called Ellie, with Delilah's chestnut hair and a spirit as wild as the Wyoming wind. Kingston grew as well, the railroad bringing new settlers and opportunities. Nate, now respected as one of the territory's successful ranchers, was asked to serve on the town council. He declined twice before Delilah convinced him his voice was needed. "You understand both sides," she argued. "The settlers and the old-timers. You can bridge that gap." Reluctantly, he agreed, discovering an unexpected talent for practical politics and fair negotiation. When the position of mayor opened following old Mayor Simmons's death, the town looked to Nate. This time, he didn't need Delilah's persuasion to accept. "Times are changing," he told the gathering at his swearing-in. "Wyoming's moving toward statehood. Kingston needs to change with it while honoring what came before. I aim to help us find that balance." Delilah, watching from the front row with 7-year-old Thomas and 4-year-old Ellie beside her, felt her heart swell with pride. This was not the solitary, haunted man who had pulled her from beneath trampling hooves so many years ago. This was a man who had found his place, his purpose, a leader who spoke not from ambition, but from genuine concern for his community. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nate surprised Delilah with a trip to Denver. Theodore and Margaret, now settled comfortably in a fine house near the city center, insisted the children stay with them while the couple enjoyed a second honeymoon. "You've earned this," Theodore said, now white-haired but still robust. 10 years of marriage and not a proper vacation between you." The elegant hotel, the restaurants, the theater, all were delightful, but the greatest luxury was uninterrupted time together. Walking arm in arm through Denver's bustling streets, they looked like any prosperous couple enjoying the city. Few would guess that their romance had begun in the aftermath of disaster, or that the distinguished gentleman had once been a wanted man. On their final evening in Denver, they attended a reception at the governor's mansion, invited as Theodore's guests. Delilah, radiant in a gown of deep blue silk, attracted admiring glances. Nate, uncomfortable in formal attire but handsome nonetheless, stayed close to her side. "Mayor Porter," the governor greeted him, "I've heard good things about Kingston's progress. Wyoming needs leaders like you as we move toward statehood." "Just trying to do right by my town, sir," Nate replied modestly. Later, as they waltzed across the polished floor, Delilah whispered, "The governor's quite impressed with you, Mayor Porter." "He's impressed with Kingston," Nate corrected. "I'm just the fellow who happens to be in charge, always deflecting praise." She smiled up at him. "Will you ever learn to accept that you've earned your success?" His eyes, still as blue as the day they'd met, softened. "The only success that matters to me is right here in my arms." Upon their return to Kingston, life resumed its familiar rhythm. Thomas, now showing interest in veterinary medicine after helping with a difficult calving, began corresponding with a doctor in Cheyenne who had offered apprenticeship. Ellie, her mother's daughter in every way, devoured books and asked endless questions about the world beyond Wyoming. Statehood came to Wyoming in 1890, bringing celebration and new responsibilities. Nate, having served 3 terms as mayor, declined to run again, preferring to focus on the ranch and his growing family. For by then, a 3rd child had joined them, James Nathan, born when Delilah was 35, a surprise blessing they hadn't expected. 3 children, Nate marveled, watching 7-year-old Ellie teach little James to feed the chickens while Thomas, now 14 and nearly as tall as his father, mended a fence nearby. Did you ever imagine this life when you left Boston? Delilah leaned against the porch railing, her beauty matured but not diminished by the years. Never. I thought I was coming west to escape grief, not to find joy. Any regrets? He asked, a question he still posed occasionally, as if part of him still couldn't believe she'd chosen this life, chosen him. Only that it took a stampede for us to meet. She took his hand, the same hand that had pulled her from death's grasp, that had splinted her broken bones, that had slipped a ring on her finger and held their children as they entered the world. Some might call that accident a tragedy. I call it the luckiest day of my life. Nate pulled her into his arms, still marveling that this remarkable woman was his wife. I set out to save you that day, he murmured against her hair. Never realized you'd end up saving me. As the sun set over the Wyoming prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they stood together on the porch of the home they'd built, not just the physical structure, but the life they'd created from unlikely beginnings. Their children's laughter drifted across the yard, a sound that never failed to fill Nate's heart with wonder. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully on land that had once witnessed chaos and near tragedy. Life had come full circle, transforming disaster into blessing, solitude into family, and 2 wounded souls into something stronger together than they could ever have been apart. I love you, Delilah Porter, Nate said, words that had become no less meaningful for their familiarity. And I love you, she replied, resting her head against his chest where she could hear the steady beating of his heart. Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows. The stampede that had nearly claimed her life had instead given her everything she'd never known. She wanted a home, a family, and a love that had transformed them both. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Delilah and Nate Porter stood witness to the miracle they'd created together, a legacy of love that had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances, but would endure for generations to come.